Hello and welcome to Life's Nuggets with Susan and Patricia. My name is Patricia Carr and I'm a life coach.
And I'm Susan. I'm a nutritionist and nutritionist.
Susan, we have a really interesting topic today. We're talking about the imposter syndrome. And I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's a big thing that's going on. And it's affecting a lot of people. It's affecting how they're putting themselves out in the world and their mental health. And it's a real block for a lot of people. So for just a quick idea of what we're going to cover here, we're going to cover what it is so people
I'm
know.
really curious about.
Yes. How it shows up, like where it shows up so that you can recognize it. What it can lead to, like what are kind of the mental health issues that can go with it? Where does this actually come from and how can we deal with it and get rid of it? So really interesting topic and lots to cover. So let's start with what is imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome are people who doubt their abilities. They feel like a fraud. I don't know if you've ever felt that way, but you
Oh
just,
my gosh. Yes. The first time I heard it, I was like, what?
yeah,
Imposter syndrome? Like, I don't know what that is. And I actually first felt it when I started doing my work, right, as a nutritionist, because when I was nursing, you work within a team, you get validation from your team as to your work, what you're doing. You can check in on people, ask questions, get that support. When you start working on your own as a nutritionist, as an entrepreneur, you have to create that team and it takes time. And it
yes.
it only dawned on me sort of about 4 years into it that that's kind of what I was feeling, right? I was like, nobody's going to take me seriously. Nobody, is this really worth, like, are people really interested in this? And yeah, I'm a fake, like, what am I doing? And it's, yeah. So I'm
And you
very familiar with it, but didn't know what it was.
It's the imposter syndrome, feeling like you're a fraud despite all evidence to the contrary, and that constant feeling that you're going to be found out, which is pretty freaking stressful. But you know what? You really hit a really good topic there because imposter syndrome, from what I've read and from what I know, imposter syndrome hits almost all of us at one point or another.
I
And
would imagine, yeah.
yeah,
And I think you could, as I said, I didn't know what it was. I'd never felt like that before
yeah.
ever in my life. We've moved, we've traveled, we've done all sorts of things, settled here, Canada, feeling good. And I'm like, what on earth is going on? Like,
Well, and transitions. So you're
yeah.
talking about transitions, and even though you had a lot of them and they were mostly comfortable,
Mm.
but imposter syndrome can hit really hard when you're transitioning to something new because you don't know. The other thing is it can also hit really hard when you are maybe struggling in other parts of your life and it can really start to come up. So it's a really interesting thing because it can actually really hold you back, this imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
Um,
I could go with, I think I could see why. Like, because if you fall too much into that self-doubt, it's kind of like this hamster wheel. It's this really negative voice in your head that every time you put yourself out, yeah, you're like, you say something that's not quite 100%, and you think, oh my gosh, that person could go home and look it up and find out I was 5% off whatever it is I told them. Do you know what I mean? And that's what goes round. That's what went round in my head sometimes. I'm like, oh my gosh, if I've said something that isn't 100% right, they could call me out on it, right? And I've got nobody to back me up. That was
totally,
stressful.
totally. I've struggled with a lot of imposter syndrome in my life. I've got to admit, I can remember even from a very young age, like a teenager, going up and doing different
Yeah.
things and feeling like, okay, you know what, I'm actually totally believing that, you know what, I'm not good at this, and why am I doing this? But I'm putting myself out there, and so it's affected me a lot
Yeah.
in my life. And so
About it though. I mean, this is it. I don't know how. I guess it is something you can make a conscious decision about, but I guess first you have to know that that's what it is, right? And I had no idea. I just For me, it was just self-doubt. I'd never heard about it until we moved here and I started working and people started, I heard it thrown around once or twice.
Mhm.
And I didn't really spend any time kind of looking into it because you're just busy doing other things. But it was
Right.
only when you said to me, we're going to do this podcast, and I'm like, oh, that's what it was.
You need to do this podcast.
Patricia, I
Um,
need to learn. Tell me more.
but okay, so when you're thinking about podcast or sorry, imposter syndrome and how it makes you feel, I mean, self-doubt is
Yeah,
one of them.
agree.
There's a lot of shame because you're thinking, oh my God, I'm just incompetent. I'm not, I don't know what I'm doing. And that constant fear that people are going to finally figure out that you have no freaking idea like what you're doing.
Yeah,
So there's shame, there's guilt, there's insecurity. It really affects your self-esteem. There's anxiety on the really extreme end. It can be depression.
that must be awful. I don't
Yeah,
think it went that far, but it must be terrible if it gets to that.
it can really, really affect you.
Yeah.
And it can affect you in both your personal life and it can show up in your business life. And so let's say in your business life, if you're thinking about, well, how does this look in my business life? How do I know I'm in imposter syndrome? And you already said, that idea of like people are going to figure out any minute now that I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But it can also show up as micromanaging,
Yeah.
not having to deal with everything around you, not delegating. Like it's just better if I do it, then nobody can see what's really happening. Putting in long, long hours so people see how hard you're working. So you,
I know somebody who does that. I worked for somebody like that and it was exhausting.
isn't
I
that?
actually left because, and now you say that maybe that person is going through that. I don't know because they seem, but yeah, I was like, wow, I can't do this. Like, I can't work for somebody like that anymore. Like,
It's too much. And it also, imposter syndrome is really linked to perfectionism as well, which is
yeah,
another thing we should be talking about at one point. But perfectionism,
tactics. Yeah, that was
that,
there too.
yeah, that idea that I have to do it all right,
Yeah.
or I might be rejected. So there's slightly different nuances in that, but yet similar at the same time. Imposter syndrome is really feeling like, you know what? Who the hell am I to say that I'm an expert at anything? Who am I? And that constant fear. So it can really show up in your work and it can stop you from putting yourself out there.
Well, and I'm wondering if it also comes back to, because that's something I kind of came to the conclusion, sort of looking around me and talking to other people and kind of realizing, oh, this is what's happened, like this is what it was. Um, is that I think we learn very differently now, right? The world is evolving with social media, with YouTube, with things like that. We have access to learning things that 20 years ago we didn't. And so 20 years ago, things were very clearly defined, right? These are the professionals, these are the non-professionals. And now I think it's this huge gray area that society, definitely the younger society has accepted, know their stuff, even though they haven't necessarily got a degree or a qualification. Does that make any sense? And I've
Yes.
often wondered that. It's like we have so much access to learning things. Like even in my field, I learn things through listening to podcasts that of doctors that I follow. I wouldn't have had that 20 years ago. So I can pick up snippets of information that are true and but I didn't learn it in a textbook and I didn't learn it in a classroom. And I think for me that was a huge kind of like, okay, just because I'm learning it like that doesn't mean it's not true, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think the other thing to note, because you were just making me think there. Because yeah, back in the day, I mean, geez, I think I was 20 when I first sat on a computer, like, and actually looked at it and it was, I don't know if you remember how complicated it was. I couldn't figure out what the
It was
hell.
a nightmare. I hated it.
Like, what is this? Anyway, gosh, dating ourselves. But we just didn't have that. In most of the stuff I've done, we just didn't have that ability. But
Ease of access.
didn't have that access that we have today. So it makes it a lot better to do that research and feel better about yourself. But here's the other thing that I think of is that anytime you're doing something new or you're putting yourself out there and you're doing something, I do believe in the kind of fake it till you make it. And I
I think so too. Yeah, I've actually come to that conclusion. I'm like, there's a
know,
certain truth to it, I think. Yeah.
and I mean, and that's not the whole picture. There's more to this than that. But when you're trying something new, because when I started coaching and putting myself out there, it was like, who's gonna want to listen to me? Like
I
God.
know the feeling well.
And it's taken a long time to get past that and deal with that. And every time we do something new, it's doing this podcast, this is all new too. So there
Yeah.
is in life, there is a fake it till you make it, because every time you do something new, um, until you've done it, until you have some experience in it, it's not going to feel like you know everything that you're talking about.
I think it's not going to feel natural to you. And one thing I learned at this course I'm doing, um, it's related to sort of like health and well-being, but I think you could relate it to just about anything, is you know how sometimes you have these light bulb moments? I'm like, oh wow, I'd never realized that. Most people around me do. And sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm sorry, I'm the last one to this, but there we are. And she's like, do you
Aha
know?
moments,
Yeah,
Susan. We all talk about this is Oprah.
this is it.
That's
And she
all
was
I
like, do you realize why it's called a practice? And I was walking one morning with the dogs and I was like, do I realize why it's called a practice? I'm like, no. And she goes, because you have to practice at it. You have to practice your practice of whatever work you're doing. And I was like, oh, oh, okay, I get you now. And it is so true, right? The more you practice whatever you do, the better you get. I should have known that. I've played piano. Like you have to practice to get better. But I'd never related that to running my own business,
Yes.
right?
Well, women are terrible for that. What did I hear? There was a stat I heard just the other day, Susan, that what is it? Women need to know, like before we'll put ourselves out there, let's say for a promotion or something, we feel like we need to know like some ridiculous thing like 90 or 100%, or is it higher, of everything before we think that we're qualified enough to put ourselves out there. Whereas
Oh, yeah, I
yeah,
totally.
whereas men are like, well, if I know 60% of it, then
That's
I'm
good enough.
sorry. Yeah, I mean, I'm putting myself out there. So there is a real discrepancy between men
Yeah.
and women and what we feel, that fear of judgment and that fear of, because everything comes down to this fear that somehow we're going to be rejected, judged.
And then how do we deal with that, right? How am I
Um,
going to cope with that if I am rejected, if somebody does say to me,
right.
you know, you're no good or this isn't what I asked for. And I have to admit and I think that's one thing again, maybe is understanding that you can't please everybody. You will
No,
not be able to help everybody. You
no.
know, I think there are people that we're meant to work with and be with, and there are other people that are just suited to other type. You know, we're not all the same type. And I think understanding that for me was a huge thing unconsciously in dealing with this imposter syndrome. It's like, you know, I had one or two people that started working with me and it just didn't work. And it wasn't their fault and it wasn't my fault. It just And I think accepting that is very different because when I was nursing, you just look after everybody that comes through that door. That's your job. And I was kind of holding on to that, I think, unconsciously. And now I've kind of learned to go, okay, it's all right.
I completely agree with you. I think that's learning how to say no.
Yes.
I think
Oh
for
gosh.
women particularly, it's harder for us. Learning how to say no and feel comfortable and feel good in where you are, like pushing your boundaries and stuff, but learning how to say with no with what's not working for you is so empowering, and that will help with the imposter syndrome, challenging what you're thinking of, the three C's that you had mentioned, clarify, choose, create. So,
Yeah.
where is this stuff coming from? Is it
Yeah.
valid?
This is
Um,
it. And what do I choose to believe? Like, how do I choose to put myself out there? And I think it also comes partly to that comparison. You know,
Yes.
I follow these people on social media, therefore unconsciously I want to emanate them and kind of reflect that. And then again, it's like, no, because I'm not them. So, and that for me is like that, it's that choice. And then you create your own thing, right? Which is what we're doing with our channel, right?
Well, this is what we're doing. Being authentic.
Yes.
Yeah, what you're saying, like,
Definitely getting
right?
authentic.
Being authentic, warts and all, as they
That's
say,
right.
like, so challenge what it is that you're thinking. Does that
Yeah.
sound right? And put a different spin on it. Would you treat, if you like, how would you treat a friend who is saying the same things to you?
Yeah.
And chances are you would be so supportive and stuff. So learn how to, challenge your perspective and change the way you are thinking. So that's
Mm.
really, really important. Does this seem
Well,
rational to me? How can I get comfortable in my own skin? Start with baby steps. It's
and I
just,
think talk to people too, right? Sorry to interrupt, but
oh, yes.
had I been aware of what it was, I think it would have helped to have actually chatted with somebody and go, God, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm going through, because it is so confusing. Because part of me is going, but hang on, you've got all this kind of backward knowledge and studies that you've done, and you've worked in these environments and you've done this, and yet somehow you don't feel validated in doing this new role. Why? And to me, that was really confusing.
It really is. I think the other thing, just from the way I look at life is where does some of this come from? And I think some of it comes from just from change and transitions and learning like our new roles, even
Mm.
personally, right?
Mm.
We're single and then we're married and then we have kids and all those are new roles and you don't just like
There's no good.
automatically know how those things work, right? So you're going to feel like, oh my God, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So, getting used to all of that. But when you're really struggling from a deeper level, understanding where that's coming from. And so, if you were brought up with a very critical parent, or maybe, your family valued really high achievement, those things can affect your imposter syndrome, right? If your value in your families, and there's some families
On that, yeah.
like, education, achievement, all of that has to be really high. So if you feel that you're never being able to reach that level, you're
Mm.
really going to suffer from imposter syndrome. So addressing those things, and that's where talking to somebody can really help by understanding the dynamics of where this thing came from. And is that reasonable? And maybe it's not really your baggage, and you can let that go and
And
start to feel comfortable in your skin.
yeah, I agree. And I think it's just knowing that you can let it go, right? You
Yeah,
don't have to hold on to it. It's okay to let it go and go, you know what? It doesn't belong here. Like,
it
that's
doesn't need
not for
to.
me anymore. I've held on to it long enough. It's drained me. And yeah, I just don't want that anymore. And I think that can be a huge thing for people. But again, as you said, you need to be, aware of what we've talked about, like aware of what it is, or how it presents itself. And again, I'm not sure. Yeah, as you said, we're talking about it more, which is good because I think it's going to make a lot of people kind of go, oh, and I don't think, again, it kind of can come in degrees, right? You don't have to be crippled by it, but it can still be present and affect you.
Yeah.
Um,
And and you know what? Like it doesn't like you say, it doesn't have to cripple you. And you know what? It might only come once or twice in your lifetime. Like not everybody's really
yeah,
suffering from it, but just be aware of what's going on. It's okay. Just let it go.
yeah.
I think from here's an analogy for me is that, to try and move past imposter syndrome. Again, I'm going to go back to the fake it till you make it. I used to be a ballroom and Latin dance instructor. And
My goodness, you dark horse.
no, I know, so fun. I love doing it. I did that for 18 years and working with people and seeing them go through the emotions, because couple dancing, it's very emotional. You may not think so, but you're working with
I can
somebody else.
imagine.
Yeah. So you have to learn how to communicate with that person, but first and foremost, before you can communicate with that person so that you dance nicely together, you have to figure out what you're doing. And when you're first learning a step, when you're first learning a lead or a follow or learning how to communicate, you really have to consciously be thinking about it. So
Yeah.
maybe it doesn't look right. Maybe it's looking really stilted. Maybe you have moments of anxiety, things fall apart. You're in the middle of something and you blanked out halfway in between and you're like, oh my God, now what do I do?
I'm tripping over my feet.
Right.
I
Like, I
do.
don't know what I'm doing. I just twirled my gal and I let go of her hand. She's now on the other side of the room. Like, we just don't know what's going to happen. But the more you practice it, which is exactly what you said
Yeah.
earlier,
Yeah.
it becomes muscle memory. And
Yeah.
now you're going to be able to enjoy the experience because you no longer have to think about it so much. You're feeling confident.
Mm.
And you can start to maybe have a conversation with that person while you're dancing with them. Maybe you can enjoy the music more because you're not so focused
On what you're doing.
on what you're doing. So that's my analogy with imposter
I
syndrome.
love it. I
Yeah.
think it's a great way to kind of round it all off. I really do, because I think we do get so caught up in the thinking, right? We're very cerebral, we get caught up, but we forget about the doing. And I love that. I think that's really cool. I
Yeah.
like
Because as you said, practice makes perfect.
it. But we want to let the perfect go.
Right.
Almost
No,
perfect.
right. Right. Thank you for catching.
Almost perfect.
No, no, almost perfect. Comfortable. Practice makes
Comfortable. We need
comfortable.
to change it.
Confident. Confident. Okay. So we hope everybody got some little nuggets out of that and felt maybe some
Relief,
confidence.
maybe.
Sorry.
Relief at maybe if that's something that they've gone through or somebody else has gone through, actually being able to understand that they're not being odd or weird, like it's not something bad, it's just something that can happen and there is a way to get through it, right? You don't need to carry it through.
Well said, Susan. Well said. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you give it a like. If you know of anybody who might benefit, if you would love to share it, we would love that as well. And if you have any comments or any other topics that you'd like us to chat about, we'd love to hear about it.
100%.
All right, everyone. Take care and have a good rest of your day. Bye.
See you soon.